All right, welcome back to another episode of the Cropcast. Today, joining me, we're going south today. And so joining me today is Mr. Seth Busby. Seth is a regional business manager for BW Fusion out of Northeast Arkansas. And also joining me is Mr. Chad Duckworth. And Chad operates a consulting firm called Sentinel Ag Consulting out of Northeast Arkansas. And, I thought today would be a great time because, frankly, here in Southeast Illinois, we entered a heat advisory this morning for the next 5 or 6 or 7 days. And I thought it'd be a good afternoon on a Friday afternoon to go to the air conditioner, go to the office and talk to these guys about crops in the South, but kind of specifically talk about rice, and I think it's just a neat opportunity to talk about something for folks to listen to a podcast about a crop that they don't normally grow and don't normally see. And these two guys are passionate about rice. And not to mention, Chad is also entertaining a dealership with BW Fusion along with his consulting business. And he's very much a walk before you run, prove it to me and I'll sing your praises. And so these guys have been making some observations since, last fall as they were looking at some different, whether it was meltdown on rice stubble and looking at some different things this spring. And I think they've got some observations that, I think they carry over to other things as well. So we thought we'd just have a conversation. So, gentlemen, welcome aboard.
Thank you, John.
Thank you.
Yeah. All right, Chad. I got to come down here a few weeks back. We walked around in the rice field together. First time I'd ever been in a rice field, and I rather enjoyed it. But, give our listeners a 15,000 foot overview of the production of rice.
All right, we'll do. Well, I guess first I want to give a shameless plug to the rice industry. Anyone listening, if you haven't eaten, drank, or otherwise wasted at least a pound of rice today, this afternoon is your chance to do so. Everyone in the rice industry would appreciate that. So yeah, Sean, like you said, been involved in rice when I grew up in the Boot Hill of Missouri. I worked for rice farmers. Rice was all around the area. Very a good assortment of crops were grown there: wheat, rice, corn, cotton, sorghum, soybeans, of course. So got to work some in rice when I was there. Went to college and went to work for a rice seed company for several years, and pretty much just hung around. Northeast Arkansas, of course, is the largest area of rice production in the United States. I really enjoy rice farmers, just salt of the earth, hardworking people that live the rice life, I guess is one way to put it.
So let me ask you this, because you said Northeast. So I always say Eastern Arkansas, right? So there's like 1.5 million, generally speaking, and we'll talk about this. Generally speaking, there's like 1.5 million acres of rice in Arkansas. Is the majority of it in the northeast corner, or is it all down that eastern, Arkansas Delta area?
Yeah, so rice is grown all down the eastern area. But if you look at, I think I'd have to go back and look to make sure, but I think 4 of the top rice producing counties in the state are right here around Jonesboro: Craighead, Poinsett, Lawrence, Greene, Jackson. Those are typically 3 of the top 5 at least.
Well, I say this a lot, especially now, especially after, that day I spent a couple hours with you guys, and I drove for, heck, I don't know, seemed like 45 minutes before I met you guys, and seemed like I drove an hour after I left, and I was headed back towards home, just to put it into perspective. So I feel like I drove an hour and a half total from a couple different directions. And I specifically remember counting 2 cornfields in an hour and a half of driving when I was in your guys' neck of the woods. So I think that just puts it to perspective that, you're part of Arkansas. You'll see soybeans. It seems like it's mostly a rice soybean kind of rotation. And you get on, as Seth would say, on the other side of the hill, there's cotton in the area too.
Yep.
But I didn't see any cotton on that day either, because I just stayed on the right side and, just didn't see any corn and saw a lot of rice fields and and a lot of soybean fields. So
Yeah. And Sean, that pretty much, west of Crowley's Ridge, there's the area you're talking about. Just not a lot of that ground is suitable for good corn. Yes, it will grow corn, and got a few customers growing corn there, doing really good with it. But man, you've got to just place where you're going to put it, or we've got real shallow topsoil. We've got pH issues. We've got poor internal drainage, extremely poor, terrible compaction. It's all fantastic for rice production, but corn really doesn't like any of that. With that rice, we pretty much have 3 rotation crops we can grow. It's either rice behind rice, or soybeans behind rice, or fallow. And fallow doesn't pay the bills. We're starting to figure out some procedures to help soybeans become a good money maker. And that's really what I'm hoping to gather from you guys at BW Fusion, how in these rice soils that we've got, how can we increase our soybean yields? Because we're really doing a great job with rice production there. I mean, 200 bushels when I started in the rice industry, 200 bushels per acre was a goal everyone had. And now it seems like more often than not, you hear that folks are cutting 200 plus bushels an acre.
Mm-hmm.
But man, that same field, we may have 50 bushel soybean crop that you're scraping by, or you're losing plenty of money on.
Sure. Well, you think about it from that perspective. So, what do you think about corn and beans? Generally speaking, what do we do up here in the Midwest? If it's poorly drained, we're trying to figure out a way to drain it. We're trying to put tile in or do something like that. But that was the thing I noticed when I was walking, and I guess I got to make fun of my own self. I was in Mississippi. I was going to a meeting in Mississippi, and I knew it had been raining and raining and raining. And I drove 8 hours from my place to Mississippi, and I got to the state line coming out of Memphis, headed to Mississippi, and realized I'd forgot my rubber boots back here in Illinois. I go to Mississippi, and I make do for a day. And I get to your place, and I was like, Seth, let's go look at. I said, you want to show me something? He said, I want to show you some rice. I said, okay. I said, problem is I forgot my rubber boots. And he said, I'll meet you at the co-op. We drove to the co-op, and I bought a new pair of Northerner rubber or lacrosse rubber boots right there in Arkansas, because it seemed like every store has them, because you don't walk around a rice field without mud boots because you're ankle deep in water. But that was the thing, the observation I remember asking you, Chad. We're walking through there, and you're stepping through the mud, so to speak, and it's hard underneath there. And I said, is this a natural hard pan? And you said, absolutely it is. So, for the listeners, that's 4 inches tops. That's 4 inches of workable soil, and then it's basically a hard pan. And we think about trying to grow the best soybeans. We want to plant them early, and we want good drainage, and we want that taproot to go straight down. Well, y'all's taproot is going down about 2.5 inches, and it's going to make a hard left or right one way or another, right?
Yep, that's right.
So I think that's where, where when you say your land is suitable, so the things that we've talked about, we've looked at a lot of soil samples coming out of your region, especially in the fall when that's drained off and you can pull a sample. And a lot of the things that we would do to try to increase porosity and increase like say a calcium, for example, trying to increase the flocculation in that soil so that it drains better. That's not something you guys want to do.
Right.
I think you guys have told me that's it's a lot cheaper and easier to flood a field if there's a hard pan to it. It takes less water to keep on that rice. So
that's right.
It's a little different perspective.
Yep. And Sean, you just made a good point there. Looking at a bunch of these soil samples over the last decade, man, our water quality is not great that we're pumping. I mean, it's not hurting our rice crop typically, but we've got a lot that's high salt that we're pumping. We've got a lot of magnesium that we're adding to the soil every day that well is running, which is creating more issues. High pH from massive amounts of magnesium, I suppose. And just making compaction worse, making internal drainage worse. And, there's, with the economy in the shape it's in right now, there's not a whole lot of extra money to spend to do extra applications of sulfur or something to help get rid of the magnesium. So we're kind of in a bind once you get out of that rice crop. Now rice is loving life, but man, the soybeans, good grief, if you plant them and like you said, the taproot's going down 1.5 inches, then it's hanging a hard left. Then you get a 3-inch rain on top of that, and water sits for 3 days because we're so flat. We're drowning out beans, replanting. Then you get a pack and rain, and it crusts over real hard, and then they don't want to come up good again, and just the cards are stacked against the soybean once it leaves that bag.
So, I guess this is a question I have. I guess I never thought about this, but you've got so a rice field has levees around it, or they're put up. Right. So when you knock the levees down when you want to grow beans, you put up levees to hold the water in. Some of that's on contour with the land, but like a lot of the rest of the delta is on. It's been landformed to be put on a grade, right? Because they row water, so they want the water to slowly run down the rows, and that crop's planted on a bed to keep the roots kind of up out of it. But it's also for drainage, right?
Yes, sir. Absolutely.
The story of the Mississippi Delta, and I am not an expert. Anybody could get on here and rebuke most of what I have to say. Limited experience, but I love it down there. Is that it's always too much water and not enough. You're going to have both of that throughout the entire growing season. You're going to get too much of it, and you're going to run into times where you don't have enough of it, right? And so that's the reason why that land is farmed the way it is on beds. It's graded. I would assume that a lot of the rice ground's not graded because you want it to hold the water. Is that fair? Or is it graded to some extent?
So you've kind of got two different worlds there. We are seeing more land grading coming to, I'll speak specifically for Western Poinsett County. It seems like every year we're seeing more fields graded to where we're running straight levees that are spread further apart. But a lot of our topsoil is so thin that if you cut more than 1 inch or 2 off of that topsoil, then we're in a subsoil that won't even hardly grow a weed for 5 years. And the cost to actually move the subsoil and then put your topsoil back in place is fairly prohibitive. So you got to kind of pick and choose, where do we think we can get away with this, or where is it economical to grade it right? And several guys have done that. That's where we're seeing pretty good successes with soybeans consistently. Like you're saying, if you can put it on rows, get your drainage, more importantly than irrigation, then we're able to see some soybeans get up 70, 80, 90 bushels here and there.
Sure. So when you talked about water quality, that's the other thing I was thinking. So, the thing that you and I were discussing and Seth were discussing here before we started recording was, so I said earlier that there's usually about 1.5 million acres of rice in Arkansas, largest rice producing state in the United States. So put that feather in your cap too. But you guys have had some struggles this year, and I think that anybody that's familiar with, it seems like most of the Midwest, right, has had too much water this year.
Yep.
You guys have got a lot of prevent plant this year on rice, right?
Yes, sir.
And that's an unfortunate thing. But back to the water quality thing. So it makes me wonder, because I remember when we were together, like the field that we were in didn't have to be pumped, didn't have to be flooded. It was flooded by Mother Nature.
The
levees
we were lucky to get
and
the levees full.
So, and I don't know how often that gets to happen, but any observations about water quality and its effect on yield on the rice? So I guess what I'm saying is if you could have a rain flooded rice field versus a pumped water rice field, do you feel like there's potentially a growth benefit, maybe a yield benefit to having rainwater on the flood rather than pumped water? And the reason I ask that question is here at home where we're irrigated, we often think that the years where we irrigate less and rain fed more, generally speaking, those are the highest yielding corn yields. Is pumping the groundwater. But same thing, our groundwater here in Southeast Illinois, if you're as long as you're along the Wabash and in the sandier soils, is plentiful. We got all the water in the world we want right now.
Yep.
But it's not very good quality. But
Right.
when you're growing corn on sand and gravel, you don't care. You're not particular about your quality. You just care about the quantity.
Right.
Until windstorm came through a couple of days ago, I'd tell you that the early corn planted around here was on its way to being exceptional because we hadn't, it's a lot of this is V10, V12, be some tassels out in a week or so that hadn't even cut on a pivot yet. So that's usually a benefit.
Yep. So, this year is kind of an anomaly. If I remember right, I'd heard that this was the wettest year measured in Arkansas in over 130 years. So, since I've been working in rice, it's very rare to have a year where your flood is established by rain. So, I would struggle to have any real opinion or data on the difference of human established flood versus provided by the Lord. I would say the water quality coming from the air is going to be a lot better than the soil. Potentially that could be helpful. Of course, it's economically helpful, no doubt. But we, for the most part, as long as we can just get it flooded, I don't know that we're really going to see a yield difference or a quality difference between coming from the ground or coming from the sky. Of course, it could help long term by not having to pump all that extra water. We're not depleting the aquifers, at least initially this year, it looks like.
I feel like we're going to turn them on eventually.
Yes.
This even around here, we had some more rain this week with came with a little bit of wind and all of that, but and it's still plenty wet. But we do 95 for 4, 5, 6, 7 days. We're going to have to turn the pivot on.
Yeah.
Let me ask you this question. Maybe this is well, it's sort of meant to be funny, but I'm not very good at being funny. So we got a heat advisory here in Southeast Illinois because it's going to be in the low 90s for the next 4 or 5 days. You guys down there, it's always hot. So they put heat advisories out, or they just figure y'all are tough enough to deal with it?
Yeah, we've got heat advisories out. Well, I don't remember exactly what the temps are supposed to be. It's low to mid 90s, I believe, here the next few days. But I never enjoy looking at the weather this time of year because the heat advisory is the first thing you see. Boy, I look forward to getting up tomorrow morning when it's going to feel like 108 walking out of the garage.
Yeah,
but, summer's finally here.
It's the way it is here. And I was looking at I track one of the guys down in Mississippi. I track Belzona, Mississippi on my BAM Clarity app. Just because I talk to those guys quite a bit, so always want to know what the weather's there. I'm a weather nerd. I watch the weather all the time. And like this week, the same thing. We were within a degree. So from central Mississippi to southern Illinois, and I think it even goes up into northern Illinois, we're all in this together. The whole center section of the United States seems like from the lake to the ocean is in the 90s for the next several days. So
misery loves company.
Misery loves company.
Don't just feed your crops. Fuel their full potential with Amino from BW Fusion. Amino is your all-in-one foliar nitrogen solution that boosts nutrient efficiency and helps your crops convert nitrogen faster, saving energy when it matters most. With proven results like an 8 bushel per acre increase in corn and over 5 in soybeans, Amino helps your crops finish strong. Add to any tank mix. Deliver more yield. Amino. Nitrogen made smarter. Learn more at bw-fusion.com/stressless.
All right. So we've set the foundation a little bit. But and I think most people realize this because they've watched a movie of at some point in time or another that had a rice field in it. But let's talk a little bit about rice, growing the rice, and why do you flood it to start with?
Okay, yeah. So, over the last probably maybe last decade, you're seeing a lot of folks around here that have got precision level ground going to row rice. It performs just fine, a lot less labor intensive as far as groundwork and pulling your levees and knocking down levees and getting ready to go to your rotation crop the following year. But in our area west of the ridge, where we've got a lot of contour levees, it's all still primarily flooded. It's kind of a two-pronged fork there, I would say. In my opinion, probably 60% of it is for weed control, and the remaining 40% is to help stabilize your fertilizer you're applying. If you can get your nitrogen spread on the water or on the soil and then pump it up with water, that environment's going to hold on to your nitrogen better and won't let it leave the field. And buddy, barnyard grass is a terrible problem where we've grown rice since the early 1900s over here. Every other year, or maybe 2, 3, 4 years in a row at times, it's rice after rice after rice, limited amount of herbicides that are meant for grass and rice. So lots of resistance has built in the years of rice being grown. And man, when your rice gets 5 inches tall, you got one last shot to hammer that grass, cover the ground with water, and hopefully that anaerobic environment keeps any more grass from coming. That's what we typically fight. I ask all my farmers when we're going the week before we flood, and here's what I want you to spray. Here's the best thing I think we can use to kill the majority of this grass. But please don't apply until your well is ready to turn on, because we've got to have that water to help us get a good kill and remain as clean as possible.
Yeah, because I think that's important. You're still spraying herbicides.
Yes.
But this is almost like last ditch effort, right? Mm-hmm. It's just not a lot of options. So you spray what you can spray, and you put the water on it, and you hope to keep them from coming or to drown the ones that are there.
Yes, that's right. That's right.
So the other thing I've always wondered this, because I know, driving around your guys' part, there's the University of Arkansas, their Rice Research Center. There's Rice Tech that was right down the road. You saw that time. So what kind of technology is there in rice seed? So is there hybrid rice? Is it, what do guys plant? What is it?
Yeah.
Is it as technologically crazy as corn where you've got all these different traits and all that, or is it still pretty basic?
It is still fairly basic. So I started really in the rice industry about 2000. At that time, there was no technology in rice. You just had straight rice varieties. And I worked for Rice Tech there for several years, was part of the group that introduced hybrids into the southern United States. So we do still have varietal rice. We have hybrid rice. Back in the early 2000s, I think it was about 2004, maybe, somewhere in that ballpark, we started seeing Clearfield varieties come out, where you could spray New Path for grass and red rice control in the rice crop. And then shortly after that, Rice Tech started offering New Path tolerant hybrids. And so that technology, the Clearfield technology, or full page, if you're talking about hybrids, has carried us through and done a pretty good job for about 20 years. But at this point, it's been utilized so much that red rice has outcrossed. It's become resistant in many cases to the IMI herbicides. And of course, barnyard grass has become resistant to a lot of it too in places. We are recently, I'm going to say over the last 5 years, we have received Previsia technology, first in varieties and then in hybrids. Just really starting to dabble in that. At this point, Sean, there's a little bit of a yield lag planting Previsia compared to either conventional or the IMI tolerant rice. But man, I work with my growers a lot, and where we have just problems with outcross red rice or barnyard grass, like, guys, would you rather harvest a 120 bushel crop of Clearfield or conventional rice that's laid on the ground and just eat up with weeds? Or would you rather cut a 165 to 175 bushel Previsia crop that's clean as a pin, where we're cleaning up these messes? So that, it's kind of a balancing act right there for now. I know these varieties and hybrids with the Previsia will get much better. But man, I tell you what, as far as cleaning up a grass or red rice mess in a field, Previsia is really doing a great job right now.
So it's really kind of one of those deals where the yield lag may exist today, but eventually the yield lag is going to exist on the other side because of the lack of weed control. And
that's right.
The perceived yield drag is going to be better because of the weeds. So
yes, that's right. And then the other end of that, if you've got a red rice problem bad enough that when you haul your rice in to the mill, they find red rice, you're getting a dock or you're getting sample grade quality rice. You probably should have planted Previsia. So that 175 bushel good quality rice would have been a good decision.
Yeah. So there's different types of rice, right? Like we're all accustomed to Uncle Ben's white rice, right?
Yeah.
What kind of rice do you guys grow?
So in the United States, there is long grain, there's medium grain, and there's short grain. Here in Arkansas, it is mostly long grain, some medium grain. I think most of the medium grain is typically grown in the southern U.S. Typically, Poinsett, Cross, Jackson County is our medium grain hotspot. Now, California does have some medium grain too, but it's a different kind of eating quality and used for specific purposes. A lot of ours around here be used actually at Uncle Ben's, and if anyone eats, gosh, I can't believe this just lost. What's the Rice Krispie treats? Most of that will be puffed medium grain rice grown in Arkansas. The short grain rice it's grown specifically in California. Man, I'd have to go back and look. If I remember right, it's more of your sushi grade rice, really sticky, more of an Asian type rice. And there's some specialty markets here and there. There's a little bit of basmati grown and milled locally for sale, and I know there's a group here closer to Central Arkansas that's growing rice specifically for sake, and you've got, I think, a market in New York and doing really neat things with rice.
That's cool. Like you forget that, when you go to you get sake, you forget that you don't realize. I mean, I guess you realize it, but you don't think about it. It's made from rice. It's a rice alcohol and the different. I think it's neat, the different forms. I knew that there was different kinds. I just didn't really know a lot of the difference. And so, I think there's even. I think I was reading here recently where there's. I think there's like maybe one or two rice growers in the southern tip of Illinois too. That there's a. Seth just mentioned on our chat too on the recording Budweiser. Well, I was thinking earlier.
Yeah.
All the bad press that Bud Light's got, but man, bring more Bud Light. These rice guys need some market. Maybe that's the reason why the rice price isn't as good as what it once was. Is Bud Light's kind of got their butt kicked as far as market share here lately.
Bad marketing.
Corn growers, the Busch Light drinkers from Illinois that they make it out of corn. Maybe go back to being a battle royale over. We want rice beer and we want corn beer. Right?
Yeah, that's right. And Sean, that's a very good point. I'm glad y'all brought that up. Anheuser-Busch is a huge user of rice. I've got a big plant here in Jonesboro, and I haven't studied to see where else they've got plants. I know they've got one in Houston, but so I would say Arkansas and Texas probably provide the majority of the rice for Bud Light spread throughout the world. And I didn't mention jasmine rice. It is jasmine is a long grain, but it smells very good, tastes very good. There is some of that grown here in Arkansas. I've actually got some that I'm looking at this year called Aroma 17 and some Aroma 22. Man, next time you come to Arkansas, I'm going to find one of those fields and take you out there. Okay. As soon as you flood that field, you can smell the jasmine rice from those plants. It's in the air. And that's what we've started eating here at the house. Just decided we'd like that. If you go open that canister of rice right now, it smells amazing, just like you're driving around that field of rice.
Well, that was going to be a question, actually, is you spend Um, and I guess I want to talk about this a little bit. I want to talk about consulting for rice, right? But you spend your days in a rice field. That's your predominant line of work.
Yes, sir.
You ever get tired of eating rice? You ever get tired of just being around it? It's like,
Yeah.
used to work a melon field a little bit when I was younger, and I don't to this day I don't really care to eat a watermelon. My kids, I'll cut it up for them all day long. I don't even taste it to see if it's good. I just don't want it anymore.
Yep. Sean, I'm not really like that. I still enjoy rice. Now, of course, I enjoy my potatoes too. French fries are a gift from God, definitely. But yeah, we eat a lot of rice here at the house.
Okay,
my wife likes it. Kids like it. I get tired of barnyard grass, but I love the rice.
I heard that. But so I think it's interesting because, and you guys can speak to this because here in the Midwest, you get up here. I mean, don't get me wrong. There are some consultants around, right? Mm-hmm. They're pretty few and far between. And I think I've talked about this maybe on the podcast before, but getting to know, some consultants in some different spots. I mean, you guys are common in the South. I mean, it's a big business, as far as having, you kind of, I think you specialize. I mean, rice is kind of your specialty. I'm not saying you don't do the things, but, and then you've got cotton consultants, and that's what they do. They scout cotton in the summertime and they pull soil samples in the fall.
Yeah.
Make a living doing that. So talk to us a little bit of, most corn bean farmers up here, we just don't, not to say that there wouldn't be value there, but I've even said, well, herbicides make it easy and you've got a plan and you go out, and you're going to spray at this time. And what do you need a consultant for to some extent? But talk to us a little bit about, what a day in the life of a rice consultant is, just from a perspective of, what you're looking for at different times of the year as to, why it's different in the South from that perspective.
Okay. I don't mean this to be ugly towards corn or soybean farmers whatsoever. I know every crop has lots of labor that has to go into it. But man, when you're looking at a southern crop of cotton or rice, my perception is it's just much more labor intensive. Labor is certainly an issue down here, and I'm sure it's the same all over the ag industry. But man, it's hard to get enough people on the farm. It's hard to be enough to pay enough people on the farm to put the spills in, to get the levees up, to manage the water. And we got to go over here and plant these beans. You got a groundwork to do, and just the farmers here, fantastic farmers, and know exactly how to raise a crop. But it's very important, especially with, I'm not a cotton scout, never have been, hopefully don't ever have to be. But man, timing is so important when it comes to a herbicide application or a fertilizer application. And it just seems like the farmers down here have over time seen the value of having someone like me come to their farm, be a part of the operation to help them get their timings correct, where all they've got to do is call the applicator or make the application. They know that, we've got to get our continuing education units. We've got to talk to the university guys and know what's going to work in each scenario. So we're kind of they're not like a doctor, but a specialist to say, all right, today, here's what we need to do. It needs to be done in this amount of time. And here's what you do immediately after. I really enjoy walking corn. It's kind of a break because not that corn's not labor intensive or timing's not very important, but it almost seems like corn, you could almost use a calendar, see what your GDUs are, and it kind of almost takes care of itself as long as you take care of it. But
and I think a lot of what you said is extremely fair. I mean, corn is kind of by a calendar and by GDUs and like even fungicide. I mean, let's be honest. You got from the time as long as you're from the first tassel till till it's maybe not effective or whatever. It could be 10 days or 2 weeks. Just get out there whenever you can.
Yeah.
Herbicides are kind of critical, but again, you time that and say, okay, I planted this. I'm going to make the first pass now, and then I'm going to come back at, pop can high or whatever, and you just kind of time that out. So, and I think you're right. I think the doctor is the right. My wife says that all the time. She meets somebody, ask what I do or whatever, and like, he's an agronomist. He's a what? And she'll be like, he's a doctor for plants. It's just, I'm not a doctor by any stretch of the imagination, but
right.
Put it into a context where somebody else would understand it. That farmer's got a lot going on. And I'll say that I think there's a lot of consultants in the corn and soybean world, and I think the ones, or there's not a lot of them, but tend to be a higher management level.
Yes,
getting into the weeds deeper. You're focusing more on a lot of different things, and I think that you tend to have a higher, more advanced management when you do use a consultant per se.
Yes.
So, farmers are busy. You're 100% right. Can they do it all? I'm sure there are a lot of them that can, but a lot of them, would rather have, like I had a farmer call me today about why dropping some nitrogen on corn. Some of it's early, some of it's still a little wet, but he's like, I can do this because I know I've got to replant some beans. I've got to do some different things. 95 degrees, the soil's moist. He said, what do you think about it? I was like, well, I said, I think because it's 95 degrees and the soils are moist, this corn's going to grow really, really fast, and you better get it when you can. And I'm not too worried about that nitrogen on top of that moist soil per se, in a liquid form. If you were slinging dry urea, I might have a little bit more of a concern, but that nitrogen, that 32 is going to melt in there. And his exact words to me were, that's great. That's what I was going to do. I just wanted to bounce that idea off somebody else and make sure that I wasn't thinking wrong. And it's essentially what guys are paying you to do, is to help them make a decision that they're wrestling with in their mind. So
yes. Yep.
All right, Seth, you've been hanging out. You've been listening. For those of you all that Seth's been on an episode, one of the early episodes back from last August. He got some words in. Seth's a young man that's incredibly passionate about a lot of things that he does. He's incredibly passionate about rice, and I always support, 1.5 million acres in Arkansas is a lot of acres. But in the grand scheme of things, when there's 90 million acres of corn and 90 million acres of soybeans, it seems like an afterthought at times. But Seth, I want you to talk a little bit about, I guess, let you introduce some of the things that you and Chad have worked with. So talk about those trials that you did a little bit of talk about what rice stubble, talk about, we're not going to sit here. The purpose isn't to give us our opinion on whether we should or shouldn't burn rice stubble. That's a conversation for many conversations for different days, but you guys did take an approach of it looking at residue degraders this year. Seth, you've had some situations with some overspray and some drift and maybe some wrong herbicide product going in the wrong spot. And you've really worked with a lot of growers to kind of mitigate some of that. So,
sure.
I know when I let him go, he's going to wind up like a top, and he's going to go, Chad. So I just released the string.
Yeah, hit us.
Now, so mostly, I guess we started the year off last fall, looking at rice stubble and trying to break it down with meltdown, and seeing what we could do for the WEOC value as well as just any other soil value that we may get. And I pulled some, this is all preliminary stuff, right? Like, we don't know exactly what this may translate to. We can do some translation and figure out, hey, this could possibly increase this number, yada, yada, yada. But I pulled some stubble samples like right after the crop was harvested, and none of the tissue values changed from the last actual live plant sample I pulled, except for nitrogen and sulfur. And I pulled I think I pulled 8 or 9 stubble samples. Or Chad, you'd probably be able to. That's more than that. But anyway, a lot of those samples indicate that there's still nutrition left in the stalk in the part per million. Now, we've got the part per million of pounds and the H3As and things like that. But the thing is, we still have nutrition left in the stalk, and it's hard for me. This is my personal belief. It's hard for me to personally believe that. Sorry, motorcycle. Hard for me to personally believe that we don't gain anything from that residue. And I guess I'm alluding to the fact when we burn it off, we might lose a lot of it. Yes, some of the nutrition translates into the ash, and the ash could be back on the field. But I don't know if y'all have ever cooked with charcoal and let ash go, and there's a gust of wind, but it blows everywhere. So
if there is
again,
value, the neighbor's got it, right?
correct, or it's in the ditch.
Yep.
So I'm not saying that this is the cure all number one thing. I'm saying this is something I'm currently working on, and I'll Chad, I'm sure would agree that we'll tweak and figure out until it's just it's a no brainer, right?
Yep. Absolutely.
You guys saw enough value there to continue looking at it. Is what I take home from that message.
Correct.
Like Seth said, it's not a fully baked system today that said you can't say, hey, we're going to use melt-down residue degrader and we're gonna completely eliminate the need for burning rice residue. Mm-hmm. But you did see enough positivity going forward that says, hey, this is definitely something to continue to tweak and it has a place.
Yeah.
I can say that the trial that sticks out in my mind the most about when I had some rice stubble applied, they rolled it with the Kelly tool after harvest and got it flat on the ground and applied meltdown and left it. He then came in and planted that rice. I think he went about 3 rounds, and he didn't like the way the trench was closing, so he took a Kelly to the rest of the field. So I have a pretty neat little side-by-side of drilled directly into rice stubble and then drilled directly into work ground. And I'll tell you that rice was taller and greener where it was drilled into the stubble for about a month. And then the other side caught back up. Now, will that translate? I don't know. But it's sure cool to look at,
Sure.
Yeah. Yep.
Well, not everything we get to do provides a visual response. And so when you do see a visual response, it does give you the good feelings, that something's going on.
Yeah. And Seth, I'll add, looking across a lot of my soil samples, we are recommending like 9160 for pre-plant on a lot of our rice. I mean, just putting massive amounts of potassium out every spring in front of rice. Now, yeah, you'll have some farms where it calls for a 4060 or 5090 or something like that. But man, 160 pounds of potassium is just ridiculous. A few years ago, when P&K was so high, $1,000 a ton, a lot of my customers are like, "Can we skimp here? Can we reduce this amount?" And I'm like, "Well, we're at that point when we cut our potassium by 25%. What kind of disease are we about to see? What kind of lodging are we going to bring on ourselves for doing that? In a tight year, you got to do what you got to do." So, man, I'm really hoping this meltdown will speed up our nutrient cycling. Will free up some things and help us in a tight year know that, hey, we're fine. We can cut 25, 30, 40% off of this and put a lot more money in our pocket.
That's cool.
I guess
go ahead.
Some of the stress mitigation, some of the things that's been happening, a lot of calls that I've received and some of the treatments we've been applying to the rice. I've had a lot of herbicide drift injury or maybe something was in the tank that wasn't supposed to be on specifically rice. I don't know. I do love rice, but this is kind of the way that it happened, right? But anyway, we would get these drift claims, I guess you would say, and I would try to come up with maybe a concoction on what to do to mitigate that stress as fast as possible, or help that plant get through that stress event as fast as possible to continue making sugar. Because at the end of the day, that's the only thing the plant is trying to do is make yield, or really to make sugar to feed the biology to then make yield, right? So if we can make that plant snap out of it and think, okay, I'm not stressed out, I'm good, I can go back to I guess a sense of normalcy, then that is going to it would have to translate to yield. in my mind. And we've been utilizing things like Amino, Relax RX, 401, our uh, biological consortium. But I think that what I've seen so far, it's been within 9 days after application. It doesn't even look like the same field. And I know I sound like a salesman, but it is breathtaking to see, honestly, because I haven't seen anything like it. Now I obviously want it to translate to yield, but we don't leave the check strip because we'd like to save the entire stuff.
That came up in conversation yesterday, Seth. It was there was some stuff going on out in Oklahoma and Kansas. Same deal, right? They were trying to, and it might have been Nebraska, but it was similar situation. They deal with hail out there, right? Mm-hmm. And when they're dealing with hail, same deal. Guys are looking at Relax and looking at a couple things like that, as opposed to fungicide in a lot of cases, because most of your disease that you get from a hailstorm is bacterial and less about fungal. And so a lot of folks still apply a fungicide, but what they're doing, more than likely is mitigating the ethylene that's built up in that plant after that stress mm-hmm. event. Well, Relax does that. It mitigates ethylene, suppresses ethylene as good as anything I've ever seen. But then it's got the amino acids to kind of rebuild and get the protein, start creating proteins and forming that reparative tissue. And the same thing came up, and one of the other agronomists was like, hey, he's like, well, we didn't do any checks, so we don't know if it paid at the end. And I'm like, well, if I was a farmer and I just had hailstorm beat up a section of my ground, I don't know that I want to leave a check either. If I've got a problem, I want to I want to feel good about the entire problem. And when you apply some of these products and you do that mitigation, nobody wants to leave a 120-foot pass or mm-hmm. whatever, an airplane round or whatever to see if there's a difference. You just want it to be back like it was, So I can appreciate that lack of a check strip, and that's, I don't feel like that's making an excuse, to say, well, we can't prove it because we didn't get the yield. But that's just kind of the way, if you're in that situation, your mentality is, I don't want to leave a check strip and see if we did fix it. I just want it to be fixed. Right. Mm-hmm. So I think that makes a ton of sense, whether that's a herbicide spray or whether it's hail damage or what it might be.
Yep. And Sean, I guess I'll bring up the BioBoost and BioCast trial that we're running. The reason you came to Arkansas, it took me a little bit of talking to get one of my farmers to use it. I'll be honest with you, they've seen stuff like this come and go before. Sure. Everything you can put on it's going to add 5 bushels, and you spend this $10 here, and it's really going to turn your yield on and different things. And so, a lot of skepticism. And so anyway, regardless of that, we ended up using some of the BioBoost corn mix that you guys had, because it had, if I remember right, some zinc in it, and we need zinc here on our rice crop. Used it at a 1/4 ounce, had a 0 check in there, of course, and used it at a 1/2 ounce on part of the field. And I remember, Seth, you feel free to chime in, or Sean too. The day we were there doing the root digs, it didn't seem to matter which rate of BioBoost you were looking at. Both of the half rate and the full rate, the amount of secondary roots and the size of the root mass in total really seemed to stand out compared to the 0 check.
Yeah, that was
I agree.
A really neat one to look at, because I didn't know what to expect. We've been talking about these since long before they got enacted. Mm-hmm. When it comes to, I'm not afraid to say it, when it comes to biology in rice, where it's flooded, where it's underwater for, y'all basically don't you put the water on once it's established, and mm-hmm. then once it's, I don't know the stages, so I can't say. Once you're established, the water goes on and it comes off basically for harvest. I mean,
yes.
So when you take biology and you put that in the soil, are we going to see the same thing in a flooded field that we see in a, say, in furrow or pre-plant on a cornfield where we hope to not be saturated? We didn't know what we were going to see, right?
Yep.
So we've talked all along that everything that you do is a trial because we don't know.
Yep.
You go from an aerobic to an anaerobic situation, and we would expect things to react differently. There was no cherry picking in that field because it was on this side of the levee. It was contoured levees, and this side was treated. That side was untreated, and this side had, this half of that field got something else. You're walking through ankle deep water. You stop, you grab and dig up a clump of rice, and you take it up and you wash it off in the water, and you take it up and you look at it. It was as random of a selection as I've ever seen, and if the BW internal messaging group right now is active with all the pictures of the difference, but that was one of the most stark differences I had seen. Seth, explain what we did, because I can picture the picture of it in my head, but I don't remember which the treatments were. I know you got it down to heart.
So we had a grower standard practice, or just a check, and we had half an ounce, which is the normal rate of BioBoost. We had a quarter ounce of BioBoost, but then we also had some BioCast Max mixed in there. So we did some. It's almost, the trial almost kind of looks like a half or a quarter of a checkerboard, if that makes any sense. We've got some BioCast Max with a quarter ounce of BioBoost, BioCast Max at 16 ounces with a half ounce of BioBoost, and we kind of just varied rates to try to find that happy blend of what would be, well, quite frankly, the most economical and the most beneficial for the grower. We did full rates and then we did quarter rates, if that makes any sense, to see if we could still see that response on rice, since it is an inch crop.
Yep. And Sean, I'll say, I'm in that field every week. Man, I keep waiting for the day to come where I drive up and you can just see the checkerboard standing out. This one will be greener and more lush, and that one isn't showing anything out of the ordinary. But still, as of this week, visually from the turn row of the field or even walking out in the plots, you can't tell that any treatment is any different from anything untreated until you start pulling those roots and looking. And I know that is a fantastic sign that hopefully we'll see a little yield gradient show in there between all the treatments. But it's going to be interesting. I'm hopeful that we find something out there, like Seth said, that's very economical. It's adding to the bottom line for the farmer.
Yeah, I'm looking at the picture now because I hadn't, honestly. We posted it and we shared that with some people internally here, and I know you guys, we were in the field doing that together, and the stark difference from the grower standard to the BioCast Max and the BioBoost treatment, like you said, when you dig that up, the number of tillers and the color, we were keying on the roots that day, but now looking at this picture, it's like that color difference was just significant. But again, we didn't see anything that day when we dug those up either.
Right.
You can walk from one spot to the other and say, well, this is better.
Right.
But you got them dug up and you put them beside each other, and that's when you start to see some things that really aren't very subtle, but when you're looking at across there, it's hard to identify. So I don't know.
It's harder at 7-inch row spacing.
Yeah, that's right.
To see that difference.
Yeah. So I'm excited for you guys to track, to keep watching this throughout the season. Like I said, I told you when wheat harvest got over, we're going to probably starting some wheat harvest a little bit today and tomorrow for sure, and next week it'll be full bore. But told you when wheat harvest was over, I was coming back to walk it again. So
yeah,
you got my boots in the truck. They just live there now, so I'm ready.
Well, be sure and bring your mosquito dough, because they have flared here the last few days.
I can imagine.
Better bring a net for your head and be whelped up.
So I've had you guys for a little while here. What else should our Cropcast listeners, what else do they need to know about rice or farming in the Arkansas Delta to begin with?
Boy, good question.
Well, so let me ask, I guess I'll ask this. It'll be the last question, and we'll wrap this thing up, is let's talk about innovation. Because I think we've all talked about this a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
So much in the South, and I think this is anywhere, but so much of your information truly does come from the university system.
Absolutely.
And that's, and I had Dr. Connor Sybil on from the University of Illinois a couple of weeks ago. I really like him. I like the way he thinks. He's thinking in an innovative manner, right? Sometimes we pick on universities to some extent that they're not thinking in an innovative manner.
Yep.
But has there been much innovation in rice? I mean, obviously there's the hybrids. We talked about that. But as far as nutritional or growing or trying to, it's pretty basic, isn't it?
Sean, it is. And man, hey, utmost respect for the guys at the University of Arkansas. Those guys do fantastic work, every one of them. It has really let us kind of open up this floodgate to get to 200 bushel yield across the farm, like I'm talking about earlier.
Mm-hmm.
But as far as biology innovation, I mean, I haven't asked very many of them many questions about it, but it seems like it's all still pretty well by the book. We're tweaking things that we've kind of had some direction on for the last 50, 60 years, but you start dabbling into a little bit of biology, and you kind of get steered back to, our nitrogen trials say this, and our P and K, here's what's going on in the soil and things like that. And not a whole lot of conversation will be had about biology.
Well, there's so much about the crop that I don't know anything about the crop, but like even just the nitrogen piece of it. I mean, you got 4 inches of water all over the ground, and you're all spreading nitrogen in the water to feed that rice crop.
Yep.
If you come right here to Southeast Illinois right now, I can take you to fields that have water standing in them, and you sure as heck aren't going to go spread nitrogen in that standing water. But it's corn, right? And that corn's as yellow as can be, and it's not breathing, and it's probably dying. It's just a different animal. But everything that we think we understand about nitrogen management, y'all kind of blow that up and have a different animal. So.
Yep, it sure is.
All right, guys. I have thoroughly enjoyed this conversation because I enjoy learning about something new. And rice is something that I know very little about. So I enjoy visiting with you guys because your passion for it is evident. I really appreciate Chad coming on. Again, if you're listening to this and you're in the Arkansas Delta area and you're looking for a rice consultant, Sentinel Ag Consulting I think Chad could hook you right up. If you're down
Absolutely.
That way and you want to visit about BW Fusion products, we got Seth Busby down there, and anywhere throughout the Arkansas, Mississippi. I think he even dabbles into northern Louisiana a little bit. If you're down that way and you want to learn more about what BW Fusion's about, we can get you in touch with Seth. So with that said, let's wrap it up. Thanks for joining us for another episode of the Cropcast. Guys, I appreciate it.
Y'all.
Have a rice day.
And that wraps up another episode of Cropcast by BW Fusion. If you're ready to bring the power of BW Fusion to your farm, visit us at www.bw-fusion.com or call us at 888-429-3874 to get connected with your local dealer.